Hello, LinkedIn. Great to see all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which side of the planet you're watching this from. We are here with Fabrizio Brasca from Blue Yonder to have a live Q&A discussion on the presentation that Fabrizio, together with Baron, had on the makers and movers. Fabrizio is here today to give us more input in terms of Blue Yonder, in terms of the work that they do around global transportation and top practices to drive an effective global transportation program. A few words on Fabrizio. I'll briefly introduce him for the ones that may not have attended last week. He is Group Vice President for Global Solutions. In the role, he leads the organization to drive thought leadership, go-to-market strategy, and solution execution excellence for more than 4,000 customers of Blue Yonder worldwide. He was also previously VP of Solution Strategy, Supply Chain Execution, as well as responsible for developing innovative strategies across all industry verticals. And as many of you know, Blue Yonder, a brief introduction, is the world leader in digital supply chain and omni-channel commerce fulfillment. They have an intelligent end-to-end platform that enables retailers, manufacturers, and logistics providers to seamlessly predict, pivot, and fulfill customer demand. So, for Fabrizio, without further ado, great to have you. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much. And I guess good afternoon your time, or good evening, and good morning to everyone in North America where I am.
And let's start maybe with last 12 months, 12, 16 now, one disruption after the next, COVID-19 being the biggest, but okay, there's been all sorts of things that happened. So tell us some impact. I mean, some is more obvious than others in terms of your clients, and also how have you worked through it, right? I guess some concrete cases of how Blue Yonder has helped clients navigate the last months.
Yeah, let me talk about a couple of things there, because obviously it's hard to narrow it down to just one specific impact. But I want to take it from two perspectives. One is the actual supply chains themselves, and then of course an interesting thing to talk about is actually our interaction with our clients, because that obviously dramatically changed as well. So first of all, one of the things that we quickly realized when this all started is we have, not that we didn't already know, but it's certainly put things at the forefront, is that we have a very wide customer base, meaning it spans multiple industries. So when you start to think about the actual supply chain impact, some industries were hit very, very significantly, particularly, as we all know, brick and mortar retail stores, store closures, mall closures, right? The limiting of large groups of people, that was absolutely a challenge. But then others were starting to, I wouldn't call thrive, use the word thrive is the right word, but certainly they had active business. So logistics providers, grocers, right? Obviously dealing with a lot of activity and different activity. One of the things that emerged that was common was it really forced once the first few months went by and people were starting to, I don't want to say settle into the challenge, there was a recognition that companies needed to accelerate their digital transformation. They couldn't sit still because now they were being forced. Now the flaws and the challenges in their supply chains, the trends that maybe they looked at but didn't really engage in, particularly around digital commerce, were now in the forefront. And if they didn't start to invest and understand what they could do differently, they weren't going to survive. So that was very significant and eye-opening. The other side of it, though, was the actual interaction. Many are familiar, especially working on the solution practice and working with our customers. We're used to flying around, and all of a sudden we were put in a state where we couldn't engage in person, and not just from a in my case thought leadership or sales type of perspective, but also from our implementations. We had to implement remotely, and that was a very interesting challenge. But at least at Blue Yonder, we were very ahead of the curve of engaging on a digital format. Through a lot of focus and dedication, we continued the projects for our customers. We didn't really halt anything or delay anything. We were able to engage in particularly some where, for example, in the logistics space on the warehousing side, you're used to being in person. We were able to really facilitate these implementations remotely and drive value and success. So it's been interesting.
Mm. And maybe let's take some examples, I guess, or some case studies that made you most proud, and on the point of also the shift where all of a sudden you are not there physically and you have to do it digitally. Tell us, tell us more.
Yeah, I'll take two examples. Certainly most proud, I will say one of the things that we did, and it was a little, kind of a little thing, but one of the things we did very early is we proactively put capabilities out in the open market for our customers to consume right off the bat without any us looking to get any praise or economic benefit. We actually used some of our platform technology and our control tower technology to put together a digital war room to be able to track infection rates around the world, so people would understand, superimpose that on top of their supply chain, so they understood where things were going to be most impacted. We did that as a service and put that out there, and a few of our customers tapped into that and leveraged that into into our networks. So quite honestly, from a pride perspective, I was proud that we did that proactively. And that was just one example, but I was involved in several others where we reached out to customers and just asked them, what can we do to help? Right? Not try to sell them something new, but could we do a modeling study? Could we look at, some transportation impacts based upon, limited capacity or whatever it happens to be. We proactively really wanted to be empathetic with our customers. We obviously were going through stressors like everyone else, but no more so than our customers. And then, of course, on the other side it was the digital engagement. It was a challenge. We found that when customers were engaging and looking at our solutions, being virtual, actually allowed them to do things a little differently, where instead of, maybe previously they would have had to fly a global team in and spend time and expense and been very, rigid on time consumption. Being virtual, it allowed them to spend more time on the details, and, the demonstrations and the interactions got longer and longer. Obviously that gets very trying, as we all know, in a virtual world. Some of these sessions can be a little trying on the eyes and mentally fatiguing, but it allowed us to engage. And again, much like many of our customers that were forced to look at their digital transformation, we needed to look at how we engage digitally as well. So when we were interacting and, whether it be engaging on a discovery to learn more about a customer's business or demonstrating the software, we looked to be creative to find ways to engage the customer and keep their interests, through a longer time duration. And that was an interesting challenge, but we were quite successful in it.
And talking about machine learning, and that's one thing that Blue Yonder is driving quite a lot in the implementation and also in the overall software that you provide. What's some of the lessons there? Because still to this day, I think there's a lot of skepticism and people that are not really familiar or trusting the algorithms.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, and it was one of keen interest for me. My background happens to be mathematics, so I love all this stuff. It's very interesting and intriguing. I think a couple of things that are important to understand. One is that there's too much marketing out there, and that's one challenge, right? There's too many companies that throw out the term artificial intelligence or machine learning, and they just talk about it like it's magic. And something has AI and ML, and suddenly it works better. And that's not how it works. You have to be very explicit about the use case that you're trying to solve and how the data that you're collecting pertains to that use case. And we find we've very much taken that approach to make sure that we're in the details, if you will. And that makes it a little bit more real for our customers. It allows them to understand exactly what's happening, even if it's difficult to see. Because one of the things that's interesting about machine learning is unlike, say, traditional transportation algorithms, where if they're exposed, you can see the specific heuristics invoked, and you can see the calculations happen. Machine learning, by definition, is happening at such a high volume and a high disparity of data. you can't really watch it. It doesn't interact that way. And so, that leads to the other challenge where, our customers, they're uncomfortable leaving it to a machine and just seeing an answer. They're used to having, some sort of user interactivity. They want to see metrics. They want to see, they want to be able to change parameters because that's the world that they're used to. So what we found is you really need to merge those two worlds to bridge that gap for customers. So you have to really articulate what the machine learning, capabilities are focused on. And then you need to give them a paradigm where they can see the metrics that are being impacted. So if I'm doing a probabilistic forecast that's taking all sorts of data to be able to come up with my daily item by item, location by location forecast, I want to know that, let's say, for this particular SKU and location combination, that weather is the primary thing that's influencing it, or it's weather combined by a special event. I don't want to just see the answer. And so bridging that gap for them is really, really, really important.
I'll pick a question that came from the event platform and it's linked to what you said earlier. And it says, tension between being empathetic to your client and meeting your sales target. How do you solve for this? We see this in freight rates. I don't know how much empathy there is right now in freight rates, to be honest.
Right.
But anyway, so we see it in sales practices across the board. What's your thought of it on this?
Yeah, it's that's an excellent question. I think when you're engaging with customers, ultimately, customers are engaging in these processes. They're gathering requirements, they're looking at demonstrations. They have scorecards, all of these things that happen, and those seem to be very antiseptic. But the reality is people are still engaging, and you have to engage at a personal level. And there's a cliche out there, and cliches exist because they do have an element of truth, and that's people like to engage with, and people buy from people. They like to engage with people on a personal level. And so yes, we have sales targets, but the ability to be empathic with your customer, to understand what they're going through, to put yourself in their shoes, to have the willingness to ask the questions, to understand what they're doing, that it just builds a relationship and it builds trust. And if there's trust, then those customers, remember, they're engaging in some significant transformations. In a lot of cases, there are jobs on the line. So it's really important to build that trust. To, again, another cliche, we talk about being a trusted advisor. That's not a trivial thing. You need to put yourself in that position, and the only way you can do that is by engaging in an empathic level. Ask questions, put yourself in their shoes. And we find customers obviously respond very well to that.
And I'll bring up this point made by Ellen. Empathy today is sales tomorrow. An empathetic business partner today will be a longer term partner. And it's true. As long as you take the win-win approach long term, not can I close you today, it works.
Well, I like to use myself as a great example. I've been working for Blue Yonder through obviously several acquisitions for almost 27 years. And you can't have a career like that if you are short-sighted in the way you interact with customers. So building relationships, building empathy, having that rapport, that's key to a sustainable level of value, not just short-term. That's the important point.
And when all this transformation requires change management, requires taking people on a journey, simply put, what's the most important element of that change journey that you focus on when you're dealing with your clients and their teams and the people inside?
The most important is always that's a tough thing to answer, because there's so many things that are concurrently important that happen at the same time. One of the things that personally that I've always focused on is because you talk about change management, by definition means customers need to change. And you've been in the space like I have. In a lot of cases, customers sometimes look to adopt technology, but they get caught in the trap of just replicating what they were already doing. And of course, that doesn't really move the needle forward. That's not a transformation. It's maybe a little bit of an augmentation, but those are very different things. And so, we definitely focus on helping customers understand that there could be a better way and that they need to embrace things from a different perspective. And then I would tie that, if I put a second thing that's important, you need to have executive buy-in and executive participation. It can't be just the project teams, because they get derailed, they get focused on tactical things. You need to have the executive level oversight to keep the focus, to maintain the support, and to celebrate the victories when they happen. So, I think those two things combined are critical.
How about digital mindset? This is a term that's been thrown
Yeah.
around in recent times, or maybe not so recent years. What's your take on this? What does it mean to have a digital mindset for a supply chain professional? Are there certain traits?
Yeah. And it relates a little bit to the previous question, and many people will answer a different way. I'll give you my perspective. We're in an interesting, and I guess you could say this at any point, we're always at an interesting point from a technology perspective. I really feel that today we are at a level of advancement that it's happened so quickly that we didn't think we would get here. Think about things like the abundance of data, right? When I'm a little bit older than you, when I came into this space in the transportation space, if you got a signal from your carrier once a day, that was great. If it was right, you were, really having a great day. Today, things like GPS data, it's ubiquitous. I mean, it's so widely available. Let alone other streams of major data, whether they're internal or external, data is abundant. You add to that the processing power that's available, especially through public clouds. You add to that, we talked about machine learning and artificial intelligence. These are real things. And people forget, because we've done such a good job in the consumer world to implement those capabilities, right? They're transparent to us. I mean, your phone is a great example. It's got constant AI and ML operating across a multitude of use cases, and no one bats an eye. You bring all these things together, and what that needs to necessitate for in terms of a digital mindset is people now have to stop thinking about how things used to be and start to embrace the art of the possible. So, a great example that we often talk about is, in a traditional world, we talk about transportation, and we talk about warehouse, and we talk about forecasting, and we talk about replenishment, these functional silos. But with the advancements of platforms, with AI and ML looking across dimensions, we can start thinking about use cases, right? And focusing more on that customer result. And that's a tough mindset for a lot of organizations to understand, right? To link all of these things together and start to think about, what am I solving ultimately for the customer? And I don't need to worry about the fact that these are all separate, software components. That's becoming gray. And so really embracing that art of the possible and thinking through, what can be achieved, especially with, again, the advancements in technology.
I'll pull a question that came through. Felix is a good friend from Mexico. It's a reality, what he's asking. Analytics and IT improvements are generally centralized. The scope doesn't reach subsidiaries where manual activities sometimes are preferred, less accurate, but still preferred. How do you roll out solutions that can be adaptable, right, everywhere without necessarily, knocking off the systems?
Oh, well, I want to thank Felix. What a great question. And this is one definitely right up my experience. There's a couple of things to, especially from a transport perspective, to think about. One is one strategy that we've always invoked with our global clients is this notion of a global template. In fact, Johnny from Bayer and I talked about this last week when we had the fireside chat. And a global template does a couple of things, because one of the challenges with these global rollouts is listen, I sit in North America, I'm in Canada, and we're spoiled with economies of scale, right? Same in Europe. right? You've got large geographies, large economies. So deploying, let's say, and we'll use transportation example, deploying a transportation solution in those regions, easy to quantify the value. The business case is there, wonderful. Well, what happens when you start rolling out capabilities, as the question lays out, to smaller geographies with smaller economies, right? Maybe in Southeast Asia or maybe in parts of Africa. It's difficult if you're doing everything one project at a time. It's very difficult to justify the cost and the investment and the effort. So we talk about this notion of a global template where you typically, depending on how you're organized, you have a squad that is the central kind of repository and accumulator of knowledge across the globe. You need to gather requirements of all these regions and understand, and that means in some of these regions, where maybe they've done things manually, you have to, expose the ability to do things in an automated way or advancements of capability. In some cases, understand where they need to continue to do things the way they're doing because it's a necessity. And essentially, you come up with the cliched 80-20 rule. And when you go into a region, you have the flows pre-baked for, let's say, 80% of what you're trying to achieve, but you leave that 20% for regional nuance, right? Regional configuration, because that's always going to be the case. I've been very lucky in my career. I've literally traveled all over the world and seen logistics in very disparate geographies. I've been in India and I've been in China. I haven't just, sat in North America all my life. I've been everywhere. And you really have to appreciate some of the challenges that they have in these geographies, and you have to be able to account for them. But at the same time, there is value in driving commonality. And, with one of our customers, they took the approach of, they created a menu list of capabilities. And so when they rolled out to the different regions, a region could pick or choose the capability they wanted to invoke. But once they picked that capability, they had to roll it out, for example, from an integration standpoint in a standard way. So you get the best of both worlds. You're not recreating the wheel every time you go into a geography, right? But at the same time, you're leaving the flexibility for that, regional nuance. The second part of that is structure. Always interesting to say, hear a technology person say, it's not always about the technology. There's actually organizational structure that is important. And from a transport perspective, it's important to establish the tiers of metrics and structure across the organization, right? So you want to have global governance, global metrics, but then you want to have, and you may have capabilities and things you do at a regional level. And then you have the local execution, which is an entirely different animal. You want those connected, but they don't have to be uniform, right? You can have the people at the local level do things a little differently and react real time, but you do want commonality at a global level. So understanding that structure, and we've seen that implemented time and again with large global organizations. You have to think through those strategies as well.
Here's another question for you, Fabrizio. Thanks for that explanation. It's a loaded one, so let's ignore the first part. Let's just go, has it ever happened that you tell a client, we can't help you? And I guess that's linked to, are there certain minimum elements for making change happen? So it's flipping it around, right? So
wow, yeah, that's, in my experience, certainly there have been cases where maybe a customer is looking for a certain set of capabilities that could be just not in our footprint. I mean, that's, that has happened. It's not as common, especially in a transport perspective. We have a, very robust footprint. So there's very little that we can't do, but that sometimes happens. And, then you get the side of scale, right? Where, our history is with very large customers. And sometimes if you don't have if the economy of scale isn't there, then it's difficult to create the business case, to engage in, especially when you're dealing with advanced technology. So you gotta balance those things. It's very rare we would ever say no. I mean, we try to help everybody and solve their problems, but there's a case where maybe the value proposition doesn't play out because of the nature of the freight or the nature of the operations. and usually we're working together with the customer to understand how those metrics align or don't align.
On sustainability front, how do you integrate that? I guess also in the measurements, the KPIs, the platform, it's an item on very high on, well, it should be very high on our all agenda. So talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, it should be. That's I think the key statement. So first of all, sustainability is a very natural thing, at least especially in the transportation space. But by definition, if you're reducing miles, if you're maximizing asset utilization, if you're reducing empty miles, you are lowering your carbon footprint. That's a reality. It's just that's pure math, right? You drive trucks less, you create less CO2. And we do have a lot of customers that do reporting. We have standard dashboards where we report out sustainability metrics, and those metrics can change depending, from customer to customer, depending on available data. But one thing I'm going to make a point to comment on is, I know from our standpoint, we actually have deeper capabilities that are untapped. So we could actually make routing, modal decisions based upon sustainability metrics. If a customer wanted to get to that level of granularity, if they wanted to spend the time and the effort to configure and look for those opportunities, I don't know if enough organizations tap into that. So a lot of organizations will tap into metrics. They'll measure the things that I talked about that are naturally coming out of a transportation solution. But it'll be interesting to see if organizations start to make the leap to go a step further, because sometimes it may be the case where the cost of transport is actually more in order to get a lower carbon footprint. That's where decisions get difficult, right? It's kind of very similar to the question you asked me earlier about empathy and sales targets. Our customers go through the same things, right? They have margin targets they have to attain, right? If I need to spend more to lower a CO2 emission, do I make that decision, right? Some will, some won't. And I think what'll be interesting is, as we get closer and closer to real legislation, that will change a lot of behavior. And I've experienced that, in other areas through my career. Legislation definitely changes a lot of behavior. I always come up with an example where in North America, we had legislation in the early 2000s called Sarbanes-Oxley around financial auditing. And I used to joke when I was a pre-sales person and showing our software, before that legislation, if someone asked me about freight audit and payments and financial reconciliation, it might be a 5 or 10 minute discussion. Once that legislation, was put into place, it became half a day, a full day, very deep discussion. So again, it changes behavior. So I think as the world leaders, as world economies start to really put more and more focus on this, I think you'll start to see that change.
100%. And it's happening. It's going to happen at scale, and it's going to happen fast. The other day, BBC published some plastic polluters. I think it hit the shares of those companies. I'm not going to name them to do them more damage, but that's the direction that we're going. And it should be like that. You should not go after the consumer. You should go after the source. In Europe, they're going to go after also the appliances and make them recyclable, reusable. All that dematerialization, I think, is the term. So it's happening, and it's going to happen at scale, and we need it. So absolutely great topic. Final question from me, Fab. Personal question: How has it helped or not, you being a mathematician, to what you're doing now, to machine learning, to AI, how does that link? It's just my personal curiosity, but I had to ask.
No, it's boy, no one's ever asked me, and it has mattered significantly, going all the way back to when I, as a young man, I started in this space, and at Blue Yonder in our transportation practice, our optimization capabilities are part of our differentiation, our pride and joy, and where it helped me is, first of all, I understood how it worked, because I actually studied as part of my degree. Obviously, like anyone that focuses on mathematics, I did a lot on combinatorics and optimization and operations research, and so I understood all the techniques. And so this very much relates back to your machine learning question earlier around customer adoption and concern and reticence. It allowed me to explain how these things were working in simpler terms for those that aren't mathematicians, and walk through the process. Explaining, a heuristic, for example, it's just a mathematical expression of decisions you and I make every day. And I used kind of putting things in those terms, and it allowed me to do that very effectively and with a level of credibility, because clearly I understand how that works. And with machine learning, it's the same type of thing. I'm not as advanced. My degree now was a long time ago. And we have an amazing group, large group of AI and ML experts who can get into the detail. But I understand it enough to be able to, again, try to bridge the gap between our customers that maybe don't have that experience, and help them understand, hey, this is what it's doing. How it's considering things, and this is why the result is coming out this way. And it just, again, it creates a level of empathy with our customers, and helps, creates trust.
Thanks for that. Well,
no problem.
Fabrizio, been great. I'll take you. There's been many other questions. I'll take you separately if you have time to answer them offline.
For
Pleasure
sure.
to have had you. Keep up the great work, and hope to see you soon in person once we can travel again.
Great. Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much. This was really enjoyable. Thank you.